Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant. Today we're coming to you from Wetzlar, Germany, global headquarters for Leica Camera. With me, I'm delighted to introduce you to Steffen Rau. He is the product manager for Leica's brand new SL3. Steffen, thanks for taking the time with me.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we got that out of the way. Let's move on. The thing that's so interesting to me about Leica, and it was reinforced actually yesterday in comments from Andrea Picella, that yes, it's about the gear, but no, it's not about the gear, it's about the people. And when I say things like that, and guys, those of you who've been around for a while on the channel, you know I say it very often, I'm typically thinking about the person behind the camera and the people in front of the camera who the photographer is capturing. But in the case of Leica, it really is about the people who make up the company. It's really impressive. And guys, for those of you who've never seen me before or don't know this about Leica, Leica is a multi-generational business. It began as a family business, multiple generations of that. I've met people here who have started at the ground level because their parents or parent was here before. And Steffen, you've been with the company for a lot longer than most people are at any other company. Maybe there are people who have been here a lot longer. I know there are, but please, before we get into the SL3, guys, I think it's worth taking the time to understand what makes an SL3 possible, the people. So how long ago did you join the company? And just walk us through pretty quickly what you've done.
I was Leica now for 13 years, and I started at the customer care department as a process analyst. And after process analyst, I were head of industrial engineering, also at the customer care department. And 5 years ago now, I started to be a product manager for the SL system.
It's a wonderful way to come up because you're dealing with the customers from the get-go. Now, many of you may not know what product management is, but you're about to find out why that customer-facing experience is so important. Could you please tell us, generally speaking, what is the role of a product manager?
The product manager is a kind of a link between several departments. So we hear what customers are saying, we hear what customers want, we get a lot of feedback from customers, and we have to deal with this feedback and our own ideas and implement that into a camera, into a product. Therefore, we have to give all these ideas to our development department. Then we get the feedback what's possible and what's maybe not possible. And at the end, we hope that we have a good product as we have it here, the SL3. And that's not the end. Now the next phase begins, marketing and sales. So we are finished now with the product, with the development, and now begins the sales and marketing stuff. And also there, we are linked to all these departments, and that makes product management very interesting because you have several things to do and not only one topic.
It is interesting, and good product management is by its nature complicated because you are juggling priorities. You're juggling the weight you give to different voices. Just because someone says, I want a 250 megapixel full frame sensor doesn't mean that that's feasible or even desirable. There are knock-on effects if, for example, the lenses have not been designed with that kind of resolution in mind. But the other thing that's so interesting is that you do have, the company has this very strong DNA about hearing. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
Hearing the customers.
Yeah.
And that's critical. So I know you guys want to hear about the SL3, so let's get into that a little bit. You came to product management just as the SL2 was nearing completion.
Yeah.
So that was a nice introduction, and then shortly thereafter, you became responsible for the next generation.
Correct, yeah.
So what were the things that were uppermost as far as priorities were concerned in your mind as you started this journey?
Right from the beginning on, from the SL1, we already were aware of that there was customer voices that wanted a reduced product. So a smaller product, less weight, and smaller in general, more comfortable to use and to carry, even the lenses. And we couldn't do this with the SL2. And that was the best thing we could start off was for the SL3 system now. So that was one of the biggest goals, to have a camera that's smaller and more lightweighted. And also we are working on lenses that are smaller and lightweighted, so that the whole system is getting smaller and lightweighted. That was one big important topic for us.
Absolutely. Was that the most important? Was that where you really started?
Autofocus was also a big thing because, as you know from the SL2, you are a SL2 user. We only have
Just a little bit.
the object, like object detection and the contrast autofocus, and it's perfectly for still photography. But as soon as you get to follow something for tracking, it's maybe not the best solution in the market. We know that face detection autofocus makes a better job there. And that was what we wanted to do for the next generation, so for the SL3.
And I've found, shooting with the SL3 just in the last 24 hours, that phase detection in conjunction with Leica's object autofocus and contrast detection autofocus is useful for stills in lower light.
Yeah.
That phase detection makes a big difference. So let's return for a moment to the smaller, lighter imperative. The challenge with product management of an icon is that in some ways one is highly constrained because it is so successful that it has become an icon. That's certainly true of the Leica M. We've talked about this many times before. And it has become true with the SL line. In just 9 years, it has become an icon.
Yeah.
One could argue that it has become the flagship product in the Leica portfolio. So as a product manager, do you find that frustrating that you have to operate within certain pretty clear parameters? I mean, you have been able to take out, what is it, 60 grams of weight on the body?
70, around about 70.
And you've been able to cut or the height by 3 millimeters,
yeah,
and the width by 5.
Yeah.
And you've been able to put in an articulating screen without significantly altering the footprint of the camera as well.
Yeah.
How difficult was that?
It was difficult, and you ask, is it frustrating? No, it's not, because it's for Leica. I work for Leica, and that's not frustrating. I work for a company that produces such perfect and good products, and that's not frustrating. Yeah, there are parameters that we should not change. You mentioned it. It's a kind of heritage also for the SL system. We have a kind of heritage now, which we should keep and do not want to spoil. And if you can see the camera here, it's not spoiled. So we did a good job. Our design department and the whole team did a very good job with it. It's still looking like an SL, but you see some differences, but it's still an SL. And it was sometimes very hard to make the decisions and the discussions, but at the end we made it. We changed the bottom plate. It was from aluminum for the SL2. And here with the SL3, it's made of magnesium. So we lost some weight there.
Mm-hmm.
Then we changed the shutter. Also, we lost some weight and we had more space to shrink the camera. And that was not every time very easy. But at the end, the final result is standing there and it looks good.
Hey, I'm putting down my own hard cash on a pair of them. So I get it. On the other hand, there are times when people will say, I want a higher resolution sensor, or hey, the state of the art is 8 stops of image stabilization. And we had this conversation last night, which was very interesting. And guys, I'd like to share with you that there are a number of things that the company chose not to change. The EVF is the same, 5.76 million dot EVF. The IBIS rated image stabilization is down by half a stop, full stop?
Yeah, 5.5 to 5. Nobody would see it as a result.
I spoiled it. Okay. But it's a very interesting thing to talk about, because I can tell you in the short time, again, and it's a very short time, when I do the review, it'll be a first impressions review. I found that I could shoot handheld with that down to half a second. And that's really interesting because as resolution goes up, you get to see more. And when you're using a Summicron, an apo-Summicron, you see everything. And although I don't pixel peep for my work, I pixel peep for reviews, So let's talk about that, because one thing that has changed as well with the SL3 is the sensor and the resolution. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, but just to mention, I made 1 second out of the hand.
Okay, go and flex. You're making me feel old, but hey, it's appropriate. So thank you. All right, let's move on to sensor resolution. Talk about that.
We now have the new full frame sensor with 60 megapixel resolution. So also there is a triple resolution technology. So we can choose between 60, 36 or 18 megapixels. You already may know this from the M11 or the Q3.
I do, because we own both. On the other hand, when I buy a camera with 60 megapixels,
you only use the 60 megapixels.
I'm only using the 60 megapixels. I'll pay for the bigger cards. I mean, that's why you do it.
Yeah.
That is why you do it. But I want to return to a way that you have been able to navigate, on the one hand, around heritage, and on the other hand, in a paradox, been able to reinforce that heritage even further. And by that, I'm talking about what you've done with the user interface, that is the software, and what you've done with Leica Photos. So guys, let me tee it up for you this way. I will assert to you, because I play with everything and I get frustrated by a lot. You know my no futz zone mentality. And that's been especially challenging for me, not to pull the remaining few hairs I have out of my head when it comes to camera apps. I will tell you that in this iteration of the Photos app from Leica, it is head and shoulders above any other app out there. So first, bravo to the team.
Thank you.
Bravo to the team. It is fast, 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 crazy fast. It's the kind of frictionless interaction between camera and iPhone that I think all of us were looking for from the get-go, and most of us were frustrated, if not quite as much as me. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but I also want to talk about the UI, because it's not a fundamental shift, but it is a fundamental evolution of mindset.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, not is it simply beautiful. And again, those of you who know me know that I think this is one of the best, if not the best, UI in the business. But that's been improved not just from an aesthetic perspective, but from an ease of use perspective, from the photographer's perspective. So can you talk a little bit about these two things?
Yeah, first of all, it was not easy to improve there, because we had a very high level where we started from. If you have a very low level, it's easy to improve everything, but we already have a high level, and you mentioned it, it's the user interface is perceived very well in the customer base, also from other brands. So it was not easy to do their big step, but I'm sure if you see it, it is a big step at the end. We improved it and it's fully touchable now. The icons are getting bigger, so you can use it very easy with your hand. It's very easy to read. And
I'll vouch for that.
Yeah. And and also a new icon design we did. We redesigned every icon. So I think over 200 icons are newly designed, and we call it Lycan.
I think many people don't care that much about industrial design. Someone like me cares very deeply about it, because it goes to the process of photography, to the joy of working with a companion, a photographic companion. And the paradox is that you've actually gone contrarian to the rest of the industry, because as functionality, technical functionality, which has been brilliant across the industry, has increased, the menu systems have increased in complexity to what I would assert is absurdity.
Yeah.
I would call it that. And this is the most complicated camera you've ever done, and yet the menu is fundamentally simpler. And when I talk about the paradox, what I mean is this. I believe that the original Leica 1 and the subsequent M were examples of smaller, faster, better. lighter weight, easier for precision focus in a rangefinder system this big as opposed to a press camera with a wireframe that big.
Yeah.
And the industry has grown more complicated, as I just said. And a little bit with something as big as the SL2, Leica lost a bit of that small, faster, easier to use. But with this new UI, you are returning to those values very clearly.
Yeah. And we also say the essential, and we really talk about and discuss a lot of topics and a lot of new features. And do we really need every new feature that's available on the market that we could have? Do we need it? And at the end, we say, no, it's not necessary. And we keep to the essentials.
I was impressed when we talked about this last night, that you chose to stick with the EVF that you have, that you chose to let the IBIS drop. This is interesting about IBIS because there's a difference between a spec and reality.
Yeah.
And I will tell you guys that the 5 stops is a real 5 stops from the reciprocal rule. There are other things that you've done to the camera, and I think critically important is operational speed. So would you talk about that for a little bit? How quickly the camera turns on, how quickly it goes into sleep mode, how quickly it restarts. Everything about it is a lot faster. And now I'm doing the talking, but it's also that in photos now, the speed at which DNG, full resolution, 60 megapixel DNGs can be transmitted to the iPhone is revelatory.
Yeah. 2 seconds for one DNG, for one file.
Yeah.
Before it was 30 seconds or 20 seconds with the SL2. So we improved a lot there. And now it makes fun to use an iPhone and to have a real mobile workflow. Before it was not really a workflow. You could transfer pictures, but now it's a real mobile workflow.
Well, for those of us who have good eyes, but I'm getting older, and unfortunately you just reminded me of one other thing that you've done with this camera. I have crap knees at my age, and you've now introduced something that I'm sure most of your customers have been asking for a long time. Me personally, I'm thrilled because I cannot do what Claudia does. Guys, she just goes, she squats and she stays there and takes these amazing low-level shots. I can't do that. I refuse to do it on principle. So thank you for this function. Why don't you tell us about
tilt screen? The new tilt screen, yeah. Not every customer wanted to have the tilt screen. There were a lot of voices that said, please keep it as it is, simple as it is. We do not need a tilt screen, but I'm pretty sure those customers, when they see the camera and the design is not spoiled by the tilt screen, they will buy the camera and they will be totally happy. And with the new tilt screen, you can do shots for you, for me, close to the ground.
Thank you.
Very easy, very easy. Also, I'm very tall, but also high above my head. It's now very easy to shoot some things that before you had to guess if it's the right angle or not, and now you know.
And it's not, guys, as though a tilt screen is a revelation. They've been on cameras for many, many years now. But your implementation of it is outstanding. It's incredibly robust, as one would expect from Leica. It is a classic tilty screen, no flip out. That probably resulted in a lot of conversation because this camera also shoots 8K. Okay. But it also was a challenge because you weren't going to sacrifice an IP rating.
Yeah. Before we had, with SL2, we had IP54, and now we introduced a tilt screen, and we still have IP54. So that was not easy to realize, but we made it at the end with a lot of changes with the tilt screen, but it's still very weather-proofed. So dust and weather, high rain, heavy rain, doesn't make anything to the camera.
I want to close with something that I heard yesterday, which I also think really speaks to what Leica is about. And that is not a commitment to technology or specifications, but it is a commitment to photographers, and it is a commitment to excellence. And it is in the context of that commitment to excellence and the IP rating that I just want to tell you guys, because I don't know, Steffen, if you would want to go on record as saying this, so I'll do it for you unless you want to. But I was stunned to learn yesterday the operating range in which this camera has been tested. Yeah. And the number of times you have this little machine that opens and closes the articulating screen. I remember those numbers, but if you're willing to share those numbers, I think it really goes to the attribute, the brand promise, because that's what a brand is, right? Yeah. It's a promise of what you're getting in a camera like this. So do you want to talk about those?
Start about the working temperature. We guarantee a working temperature from -10 up to +40 degrees. That's what we guarantee. Our testing department tests from -40 degrees Celsius up to +70. And that's not all. We had some customers, some scientists that were in the Antarctic, drilling these big holes into the ice to
core samples.
Yeah, to get information about the climate a million years ago. And they used the camera, the SL2 was it, the SL2, 2 years ago at -50 degrees Celsius. Was no problem.
Which is insane. Insane.
Yeah.
Well, I think, guys, this gives you a good idea about the SL3. There is one little bonus thing about Leica that we have to talk about. Because, again, to me, this really speaks volumes about what Leica is. It's the project code name. Would you tell us a little bit about that? I'm in love. I'm in love.
I'm a Trekkie. I love.
Here we go. Here we go.
Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I had the pleasure to give the project a name, and I choose Picard.
And I just think that's outstanding. The SL2 code name was Vader, but right about now, this is totally personal. I need optimism. I need distractions. Claudia and I have been binge watching. We just finished Voyager, 7 seasons. Captain Janeway is the boss. But now we're into season 1 of Picard, and it is fantastic. And it's just, maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but it doesn't feel that way to me. That you chose Picard is just emblematic of the humanity that this company is built on. So, Steffen, again, I want to thank you for making the time.
Thank you.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to cover?
There are a lot of things we haven't talked about, but the time is limited. Maybe next time there's more time, and then we talk about much more things.
Well, guys, that's it for today. For 3 Blind Men and an Elephant, I'm Hugh Brownstone, Steffen Rau. See you next time.